I kind of want to preface this by saying my thinking always evolves. I like to think that around these ideas, that I'm not static, and sometimes I can be, because we can get passionate about something and we have an opinion about it. So I'm trying to become more flexible around words like sustainability. My first reaction to it is that there's a way within which certain words get used around conservation, environment, and sustainability for me is one of them. And they get used over and over again, and often there's not enough of a critical examination of what that word means, who's saying it, the assumption that there may be a room full of us and we say sustainability and everybody thinks we're talking about the same thing. And I want to ask the question, what is it that we're trying to sustain? Because we're looking at processes and systems and all of them haven't worked. Are we trying to sustain certain relationships of power in order to get to some greater end that we see, that some of us see as being important and prioritized? And I'm willing to bet that some people listening to this will think, oh, that's not what we mean. And I would actually say, just because it's not, you're not thinking that's what you mean, it's not what it, how can I say this? Just because you may not have been intentional about that doesn't mean that that isn't also what's happening. So I think that words like sustainability need to be always challenged, and we have to think about it more flexible. I don't know if sustainability, I think I understand at the core it's an idea of human beings want to survive. We want to be able to live. We want to be sustained. We want to be able to sustain forever if possible. And for me, that's another conversation about, are we supposed to be here forever? But I won't go there. So I get that. And I think, again, we shouldn't assume that we all think the same thing about sustainability. Again, what is it that we're trying to sustain? And maybe some of the things we're trying to sustain really need to be thrown out altogether. And we need to start from the I don't know and come up with something new. And I have compassion for people because it's a scary place. People generally don't like to be in I don't know. And I think we are in I don't know, even though we think we're not. Does that make sense? I think we're actually standing in an I don't know place. So for me, this is such an opportunity. And I sense that there's a lot of fear around that. So when I hear sustainability in relation to that, there's a little bit of me that kind of tilts over this way, because I think, you want to sustain something because it's familiar. You can start from there. I'm not saying you need to toss it out altogether necessarily, but I think it needs to be critically examined and not assumed that that's where we should all be going.
Can you talk a little bit more about the I don't know piece and the possibilities, opportunities?
Yeah, I think I think we've been operating in certain systems, ways of thinking about environment and people, even just that binary, environment and people. And there's a lot of cultures in this world that actually do not think in that binary about that, in terms of that separation. I think there's a lot of ways we've been thinking about it that perhaps were never really true in the first place. And that's up for debate. We can have a conversation about that. But whether or not they're true or not, we're seeing that it just doesn't look like what we thought it was. And for the longest time, we've been saying what it is. The I don't know. So we can talk about demographic. Let's just talk about the United States. Let's just talk about, we all know what's happening in this country. Some of us knew it for a long time, that when we look about people of color and look at the idea of what difference means, even what race means, race isn't simply a black and white conversation anymore. It is a brown conversation, a red conversation. It's a mixed conversation. What is that? Aside from the obvious, we have a black man as, in the most powerful position in the free world. We have people kind of showing up in all different sectors doing work, making their presence known. And how can I say this kindly? Because I actually am not interested in painting anybody as a bad guy and therefore someone else is a good guy, because I think we're actually all in this together. And the reality is, and I'm not saying that there hasn't been power and privilege used to get certain people forward and push other people down, and that that's not still happening. It's still happening. But I think the I don't know places where many people are realizing that isn't working. It hasn't worked for a lot of us for a long time, but it's really not working for all of us, I think, in terms of where we want to go. And it's an I don't know place, because a lot of those things we haven't worked out. We still haven't worked out, I think, honestly, about what we feel about difference and what that actually means. We're still having conversations about race and gender and sexuality. We're having these conversations, and it's not that we shouldn't, but we're still having them. We're still disagreeing. We don't know how the issues of difference are connected to who we are and how we're seen. We're seeing a lot of fear, or we're seeing a lot of people being uncomfortable about where they stand. Because what if it means, if this thing means something different now, what does that mean for me? You know, our economic systems are being challenged. They've been challenged before, but they are really being challenged. Our environment, you know, is changing. It doesn't matter for me so much whether we agree on why it's changing. I mean, in terms of climate change or how we're going to talk about it. I mean, those things are important, but it's changing. So that's an I don't know place. We don't know what's around the corner. I mean, we have predictions, people are predicting, but really, we don't know. And I actually say that we never really knew. We just... we feel better when we can make proclamations about where we think we're going. So for me, that I don't know place is when I think of it as a place of opportunity, you know, because I'm interested in ideas of emergence. I'm interested in what I mean, that when you have difference coming together, difference in ideas, difference in the way people are and live, difference in terms of the way we relate and think about the environment, it's the tension between those differences that allows for something new to emerge. And that, for me, is the exciting I don't know place, because we don't know what that is until we actually lean into it and engage into it. And I think this moment is all about that. This moment is forcing us to do it whether we like it or not. So in terms of our own agency, we can choose to say, all right, I'm just leaning in because it's happening. But how can I, as a friend of mine likes to say, Kaylin Two Trees, she likes to say that it's about, I want to be standing upright as I lean into the change, meaning, you know, I don't want the change just to be happening to me and bowl me over. And that's kind of frightening. But what happens when I'm upright and walking into it with my eyes wide open, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
That was great. Along the same lines, where do you see student organizers fitting into the transitioning of our society and economies? Words of wisdom for young, anxious organizers.
So, well, you know, first of all, I want to say, for me, student organizers are first people. They're human beings like everyone else. I mean, we all have labels about how we express ourselves through our work and our art and our lives, and I get that because I do it too. And student organizers are first people. And they fit in for me. There's a couple of ways I think about it. They fit in for me just like everyone else. They have a place to be here. There's a role, I guess if I want to use the label student organizers in terms of, okay, I have to backtrack a little bit because you said student organizers. First of all, I want to really acknowledge the privilege that, you know, the three of us here in this room and all of us on this campus have of being, whether we're faculty, whether we're students, you know, being on this campus and being able to engage, you know, in kind of this learning and being innovative. We get to do that. We get to do that. Some of us get paid to do that. You know, we get to take the time to do that. We are a small percentage of this world that gets to actually do that. So when I think about student organizers, it's like, oh my God, you get to actually think about how you might organize any kind of movement forward. I think part of that is going to be informed by youth, but the way that I like to talk about that is because there's a way in our country that we talk about youth as being the thing that we all wish we could continue to have, and everything else gets deprivileged. For me, it's about newness as opposed to youth, meaning that you've come into this world later. You've come into this world differently. It looks different than when I first came into this world. And so you bring with you that new possibility that newness has. You know, there's a way within which there's an innocence, and I mean this in the best way, and an idealism, and I mean that in the best way. That newness brings with it, sort of unintentionally. And I think that that's where there's lots of opportunity, so that people, that you can speak from that place with integrity. It's not that you're trying to create that place, you're in that place. And there's something about how that appeals. I really believe it appeals to people across the board, regardless of their age and experience. Because I think we all have that. We have a kernel of that somewhere in our basic humanity. So there's something about being able to remind us of what it's like to be new, to be in a new situation, what it's like to bring a sort of innocence. And when people always say that's childlike, and what I mean that in the best possible way, because we hear people say that that's open, you know, that is less afraid of possibility and more excited by possibility, because we don't know what's happening. You know, when you're new, you're just like, okay, I'm new, I don't know what's going on. And there's a way within which it gives you some license to actually act out in the best possible way. And so I think that student organizers can really do that. And in doing that, create space for innovation, of thinking about our economic system differently or changing it altogether, thinking about the way we engage difference, the way that we engage the environmental changes differently. Because you're going to do it differently anyway. You came in at a different time.